Welcome kindreds, it's Jessica, and this video is all about the solar eclipse in Aries, the new moon and solar eclipse in Aries. It's a big one. You've probably seen lots of people talking about this already. It seems to have gone further than the kind of astrology and witchy communities out into mainstream as well. I've seen quite a lot of quite funny things and kind of also quite doomsday kind of things about it as well. In this video, we'll talk about how it's not a doomsday event at all. It's actually got a lot of potential for growth and for really exciting change, really sudden change in a lot of ways, and things that we've been struggling with for a long time, we can really just make headway on it now in this eclipse, which I'm really excited about. On the Pisces new moon, I pulled this card, which was Fox, and this is what we've been working with in this energy for these 4 weeks, because it's not just about the new moon. I see a lot of things on YouTube where it's like the new moon and it's a couple of days, kind of thing. But the way that I work with the moon cycles, I've been working the moon cycles for 20 years now, is that the new moon is the birth of that whole cycle. So the new moon and the chart for the new moon, which is what I'm going to be talking about today, is it's the birth chart of that moon, and that chart lasts for the entire cycle of the new moon. So this new moon is on the 8th of April in Aries, like I said, 19 degrees Aries, and that birth chart for that new moon will ripple all the way until the 8th of May when we have the new moon in Taurus. So this energy is around for a while, and which is why it's even more important to kind of know what is going on with this. And you're not too late if you're watching this after the initial point of the new moon. Yes, for sure, the actual eclipse point itself is going to be the most kind of noticeable and potent part of this month, but there's plenty of growth, expansion, that kind of Aries fire, Mars driven energy. We're very driven this month. And I talked about, when I did the forecast for April, the theme for April is self-centered. And it was funny because I actually went back and watched the video again from the Pisces moon where I drew this fox card, and I was already talking about self-centered then. I was like, oh, okay, so this is the energy that's been coming in since that Pisces new moon. So we're still working with that at the moment. We're working on releasing. And a lot of the stuff that we're releasing is to do with other people's programming, basically. The way other people want us to do things, when we kind of do things where we don't center ourselves, when we center other people. And that whole Aries Libra axis, which is where we are, the eclipse season since October has been on this Aries Libra axis. And Aries is about us, about the self, and Libra is about the other, about relationships. So it's triggering those points of self and other. I explained all about this in the April forecast video, so I'll try and link that at the end as well, so you can watch that if you haven't seen that already. But at the moment, sometimes it's relevant for us to pay more attention to others and about kind of building those kind of relationships and things like that. But at this present moment in time, it is about us. It's about us, who we are in our kind of core self, and who we are supposed to be. It's about realizing our potential, which is really it's exciting. I think it's really exciting. Yes, it has got the potential to be potential seems to be coming up a lot already, so maybe that is our keyword. It has got the potential to be kind of inflammatory. We have got this Mars ruled moon, and there's a lot of stuff going on, but sometimes you need a fire lit under you, don't you? Sometimes I definitely do. Sometimes because it's so comfortable to stay the same. It's like, oh yeah, that's easier, I know this, I can stay here. But this eclipse, we can't be the same any longer. It's kind of like, if we were going to bring a tarot card into play, then perhaps it would be a tower card. It's like, we need to change now or be changed, kind of thing, because it's the change is going on around us. And as when we're working with the tower card in tarot, if we change willingly, if we kind of do the inner work to bring up the things in ourselves that need to be let go of, then that change work is so much easier than if we kind of just cling really tightly to all of the things that aren't serving us anymore, which is so tempting to do, because it's like, oh, but I know it's not helping me, but I know this, it's like better the devil kind of thing. But we really need to give those things over now, especially in this dark moon time, especially in this eclipse time, to fuel the fire of change that is happening in us now. I'm going to pop a chart picture of the chart for this moon. That, like I say, is like the birth chart for this whole moon. This is the solar eclipse chart here. It might look a little bit different for you depending on your location, because it's the rising for me where I am. But there's the same stuff that is in there. The planets are all in the same place, that kind of thing. So I'll put that there for people I know that are interested, because I know lots of you who are in my Moonwise membership, and those of you who follow these moon videos do like to know your astrology, but some of you don't as well, and that's fine. So I'm going to explain everything in a way that will be, I'll point out the astrology, but I'll also talk us through it, you know, so you don't have to be an astrology buff to understand what I'm saying here. You know, we can all get the benefit of the eclipse and this energy without having to like know, oh, this aspect is happening with here, you know, so don't worry about that. I've got my honeycomb here in front of me, which is what I am using to look at the chart. So if I'm looking down, that is where I'm looking, and it's such a focused chart. When we look at the kind of like the way the aspect patterns are forming, you see this little shape in the middle of the chart, and to me it really looks like an arrow. It looks like we've got the south node over in Libra, and then everything else is like on the other side, and it's like that's the kind of tip of the arrow is over there. So in Aries we have got Mercury retrograde. We've got the sun and the moon, obviously, because we always have the sun and the moon together when we have a new moon. And we've also got the North Node, of course, because we have the North Node there. And when we have the sun and the moon making a new moon near the nodes, that is when we have an eclipse. So this eclipse, this Aries eclipse, is a North Node eclipse. And when an eclipse is happening on the North Node is like an entry point for energy. It's a very like hungry point in the chart. It wants to like bring new things in. And which is why I think it's important as well in the dark moon leading up to this new moon. If we can try and like release some stuff, especially, it'll be really helpful. And Pisces is like so good at doing that kind of release work, because it doesn't differentiate borders between between self and other, so it's more easy to do than when we get into this Aries cycle. But you know, like it can still be done afterwards, so don't worry if you haven't done that work. But in general, this is like a new things coming in kind of energy, rather than a old things going out kind of energy. And like you can do that, you can kind of bring new things in and almost like force the old things out. That is definitely one way of making change, which is definitely what is happening around this eclipse. So we've got, like I say, Mercury, Sun, Moon and the North Node. We've also got Venus there in Aries. So Venus is from the opposite sign. You know, Venus rules Libra, which is the opposite sign. And so when we have Venus in Aries, in Mars's sign, Venus is not super happy being in Aries. It's a little bit irritated. And usually that, like when we have Venus in a sign as well, it definitely brings a focus more on like relationships, on connections, on also like comforts and stuff like that as well. But Venus in Aries is more able to, she doesn't require the same sort of levels of comfort. She's more like a kind of Amazonian warrior in that Aries sign. She doesn't have the negotiation and what's the word I'm looking for? Diplomacy. The diplomacy skills are kind of gone. And we've also got Mercury retrograde as well. So communication is going to be something that we need to like watch this month, this moon, from the new moon to the new moon. You know, like that's always something, like it's always much better to be aware of our communication anyway, obviously, because that way we have better connections with other people when we can kind of explain ourselves and understand what other people are saying to us, listen well, that kind of thing. Listening is something that's probably like going to be a little bit in short supply this month because when we are all like, we're all swimming in this idea of being self-centered. So yes, we're doing that work. And like for some people, like if you've got very prominent Aries in your chart, and if you've got prominent Libra as well, you're like kind of in the opposite sign. I was just talking about communication and then my neighbour knocked the door. So that seemed very on point. So yes, we were talking about how communication, it's always good to try and pay attention to communication, but because we're all focusing more on self than on other in this moon cycle, and we have got Venus like out, not in a happy place for her really in Aries, we've also got Mercury retrograde in Aries, we can tend to be, you know, we may find that our communication is more direct, sometimes also like more hurtful as well when we get Mercury and Mars together. So when Mercury is in like Mars's sign in Aries, it can be like a little bit sharp, a little bit painful, you know. So, oh my gosh. So we do need to kind of just be aware of that, and in a way, what's going to be good about this is that it's going to be able to bring up our own communication with ourselves, so we can probably like be a little bit more real with ourselves as well, not like in a hurtful way. Like a lot of the time our self-talk can be spiteful, almost painful. Like we sometimes say things, I sometimes say things to myself that I would never say to somebody else, you know. And that's something that we can bring up to heal this month as well, you know, because we've got this communication, this diplomacy. It's like we're not going to skirt around the issues. We are going to like full look at them now. And, you know, when we have that like extinction of the sun and then the rebirth, you know, the rebirth, most of the time it's as if the sun is like swallowing the other planets. But when we have the solar eclipse, like that is why, like in the ancient world, they found it so, like people would say, don't do magic and stuff on a solar eclipse. Don't, you know, you try not to do anything that was kind of like too important for the future as well, because the energy is kind of unstable and a little bit like eerie. Like if you've ever been, and I know some of you who are in the United States now who are going to be in the path of totality will experience this. It's like when you've been in that kind of path of the solar eclipse, which I've been a couple of times in my life. I've been lucky to be in an area where it's been in totality. You do get this very like eerie, and it does feel kind of scary, you know. It does feel like, hang on, because the sun is so central to us. It's literally the center of our solar system, and in astrology, the sun is the center of our charts really as well in a lot of ways. You know, it is the heart, it is the essence of who we are, the kind of the illuminated spirit of who we are. And so when the sun is kind of put out, it's frightening for a moment, you know, but it's also really, really powerful. And this is why these eclipses are always portals. We always get to kind of step from one way of being into another way of being. So if we imagine that like the sun as being like us in our charts, we identify with that. It's the things that we identify with, the things that our kind of conscious self in a lot of ways, you know, whereas the moon kind of represents often like the unconscious self. You know, it's not as clear cut as that, but that kind of thing. So we've got our sun, our conscious self, and it gets extinguished and then it comes back. You know, we know it's going to come back again. So if we think of that metaphorically, it's like our understanding of ourself has this like blip. And in this blip, when the sun, our understanding, our conscious self gets extinguished, we have got the potential to make some changes. So when we get into that rebirth of the sun after the eclipse, as it moves out of that eclipse, we get to like bring whole new understandings of ourselves into the light, and we get to leave things that we don't want in the dark, you know, and be really bold and ambitious. You know, this is a North Node eclipse, so you know, you can make small tweaks if you want to, but you can also make big leaps now. And this is like the new moon is always this in a sense, you know, because we have the sun and the moon coming together. But when we have an eclipse, it is like 10x, you know, we've got this supercharging of this this connection that is happening. So as we normally do manifesting in the new moon, we can 10x what we're asking for as well, you know, what we want to bring into being, what we're manifesting. So yes, we've got that potential. So that, you know, that point of that arrow in Aries is like a big deal. And let's just have a little look for a moment what else is going on in the other signs, because that's really interesting as well. You know, it's so pointed, you know, like I said, it's just got the South Node over there in Aries, and then everything else is over here in Libra, and then everything else is over here in Aries with our North Node. Chiron also there as well in this eclipse. You've probably I've seen a couple of astrologers that I follow talking about that. I don't tend to talk about Chiron that much, because in these last like 5 or 6 years now, I've moved much more into traditional astrology, which doesn't work with the asteroids as much, although I'm still interested, you know, and I still do look it up. I don't share about that so much here on the channel, but Chiron is like the archetype of the wounded healer as well. So that gives us a clue as to like what is it? If we're working with this like big, bold change of our conscious self, which is also with that wounded healer, it's like saying to us, we've got the potential now to really take massive healing steps forward in how we understand ourselves, how we see ourselves, who we are basically as in our core self. So that's really amazing, isn't it? And like I said, this also like links back to 6 months ago when we were having eclipses on this axis as well. Also back to, yeah, because the last time we had an Aries eclipse was last year, like around this time last year, so around the equinox last year. So if you can cast your mind back to like last year, this time last year, what was going on for you then? The themes that have been like coming around last April into like sort of around the equinox September time 2023, and then this year, and it'll also continue as well because we're going to have the last eclipse in this cycle in 2025, I think. So we've got a little bit of time to work on this. We don't have to like integrate it all in one go. And like if we're talking about like longer term patterns, I wrote this in the, on every Monday I send a newsletter out to the Moonday Magic Mail, which has like the main kind of transits for the week and then some practical ways of working with them. I'll put a link in the description if you want to get that. It's free. So in there I wrote about how, you know, this links in with this eclipse season, but also because when the nodes switch signs, they take a long time to get all the way back around. So it takes 19 years. So this also links with things that were going on 19 years ago, and also what will be coming up for us 19 years in the future, you know. So these things that we're doing now have got like big life scale potential to just ripple out in that beautiful big life scale kind of way. So I'm really excited about it. Yes, it's going to be uncomfortable probably because change is uncomfortable, but so much potential for us to really make changes here. And like, yeah, that's what I was going to say about Mars. Mars is the ruler of this eclipse because Mars is the traditional ruler of Aries, and Mars at the moment, like at the time of the eclipse, is making a conjunction with Saturn. It's 1 degree away from Saturn. So Mars and Saturn they both get bad press because they are seen as the malefics in the chart. They're seen as kind of like the planets of that bring us more difficult things, you know, whereas like Venus, Jupiter is like, oh yeah, nice. And then we get Mars and Saturn, it's like, oh, you know, because but for different reasons. And that's why it's interesting when they come together, because Mars is all this kind of like spicy, fiery energy, and Saturn is much more, it's like the opposite. It's like considered, structured. And like sometimes people say, like when Mars and Saturn come together, Mars is like, it's like you've got one foot on the accelerator with Mars, and then with Saturn you've got the other foot on the brake. So it's almost like you can't move forward. But I was on the Astrology podcast forum, there's like a Facebook group for it, and somebody was sharing a story there about how they work with horses, and they've had this beautiful new colt which was like had so much potential coming through as this keyword for this moon cycle. And she was trying to get this horse to kind of put this power and potential that it had naturally in a more structured way so that she can do dressage, which is like the kind of, you know, like when they do all the the fancy moves and everything like that. And like that's obviously quite tricky to learn, but it's so precise and so controlled. And I loved that way of her sharing. Like she was saying that this could be a really good metaphor for Mars and Saturn. I loved that because it's like, yes, you know, it's like controlled power. That can also be like, that can have scary implications as well. Like sometimes when people who have control and power at the same time, and they're not the sort of people that you want to have that can be difficult. But in terms of like applying that to ourselves, we can take that Mars and Saturn coming together and apply that controlled power in our own lives as well. So it's discipline, isn't it? You know, a lot of athletes have Mars and Saturn conjunctions because you know, when we have Mars and Saturn together, we have this ambition, and we also have the motivation, the kind of the discipline to stick with the training programs and things, you know, that you have to do. So when we get Mars and Saturn together, it gives us this momentum as well, which, yes, it might not be super fast momentum because we have got Saturn there with the brakes on a little bit, but that sometimes helps, doesn't it? Because Mars is like instinctively wants to like rush into things. So Mars is the ruler of this eclipse, and there's all this energy going on, like I said, but Saturn is like holding Mars and being like, hang on, whoa, a minute, you know, let's really like do this properly. Saturn wants to like make things last for the long term. Oops. I've got like a little thing with my book balance on, it's knocking onto the desk. So it wants to, yeah, like I say, it wants to kind of like just take its time and do it right. Whereas like Mars is like, let's just do it. And then Saturn's like, hang on, whoa, you know, let's just cool it down a little bit and slow it down a little bit, and well, a lot. And so if you're feeling that, like, and sometimes that's frustrating, and if you've got like, if you sit naturally happier with Mars, then you might find that kind of frustrating because you want to be go, go, go. And if you sit more naturally with Saturn, then you might find that this eclipse is like kind of dragging you out of your comfort zone a little bit. So that's a way again that we can look at our own personal charts and kind of see, oh, okay, yeah, Saturn's kind of easier for me than Mars. I sit better with that. Or Mars is easier for me, you know, I sit better with that. So that's just something to watch as well. Both planets are in Pisces. And like I talked about in the Pisces new moon video, the Sun and Saturn have just had a meetup, you know, just before the Sun crossed over into Aries. And so this Saturn is a relatively kind of newer, fresher kind of Saturn, you know, where it's just had this meetup with the Sun. So I feel like there is, and in Pisces too, and Mars in Pisces. So Mars not very happy either in Pisces, you know, both Mars and Venus are kind of like out of their comfort zones a little bit. And so Mars is kind of like a little bit not happy in Pisces. Saturn also not happy in Pisces. So they aren't their normal selves. And I think with the rest of the stuff that's going on, perhaps we can use that to our advantage. It might even mean that like something that's like, if we think of Mars, Saturn together almost as like a block, Saturn often can be blocks, we can maybe overcome that now. So something that could have been blocking you for a while, it's in Pisces, it might be able to get dissolved when we're in this Aries solar eclipse. I hope that all makes sense, because I'm kind of getting a little bit esoteric about it all there, but what I'm trying to say basically is that if there are things that have been holding us back, perhaps for a really long time, perhaps for 19 years, we can reinvent that, the way we understand that now. So rather than having to do like mountains and mountains of journaling and inner work and tarot, you know, and all the kinds of things we do to, and therapy, you know, to work on this stuff, we can actually make really fast progress at this moment in time. But there are, like I said, there are still some kind of constraints with Saturn as well, you know, and Neptune there in Pisces. So we've also got, that's helping us to kind of dream big as well, you know, to have these kind of like the full potential is what this eclipse is all about. So what is your potential? Like, do you feel like you are meeting your potential now? What does that look like for you? I know so many people who say like they just don't feel like they really are living up to their potential, and a lot of people feel kind of ashamed of that as well. And especially when you get later on in life, you know, like once you get into your 30s, 40s, 50s, it's almost as if like the way that our society is that it expects people to reach their potential, to kind of ripen at a really young age. It's like, yes, by the time you're 25 or whatever, you should be fully ripened and reached your potential, and then the rest of your life is just you being the boss at your thing, you know. And for that, like that description of life just does not apply to so many of us. So many of us ripen slowly, or we mature like a fine wine or a fine cheese, you know. We take our time to get there. So, you know, if you're 50, 60, 70 and you feel like you haven't reached your potential yet, and so many people feel like it's too late now, it's too late. I remember Barbara Share, I love Barbara Shear's work. She's passed away now, but she's left this massive, beautiful body of work there. And she would say, one of her quotes was, it's only too late if you don't start now. And I think that might even be the title of one of her books as well. And like this eclipse is the perfect time. So if there's something that you've been like holding yourself back on, you know, it's time now. It is time now to do that. So that's the kind of picture of what is going on, we've also got, there's so much happening. We've also got in Taurus, Jupiter and Uranus are moving steadily closer and closer together. And later on this month, I talked about this in the April forecast as well. They're going to be making a conjunction. They're not exactly conjunct at this new moon. Jupiter is at 90 degrees of Taurus and Uranus is at 21 degrees of Taurus. So they're still a couple of degrees apart, but that is a pretty close orb, as we say in astrology. So they're getting very close together. It is basically a conjunction now. So that also, like, Uranus is a disruptive force again, and Jupiter is a magnifying force. We're magnifying the potential for sudden change, sudden growth, which is why, this is why when I saw that this eclipse was happening a couple of years ago, and I was like, oh wow. And like, as we've kind of got closer and closer, it's like, yes, this looks like it's going to be a really big deal. This is definitely the kind of most potent moment of this year, of 2024, and possibly even like of the surrounding few years, really. April in general has got quite a lot of big stuff happening, but yeah, this is really... is a really big deal. So and it's hitting so many of the signs as well, because we've got a lot of stuff happening in Aries. So this is hitting all the cardinal signs. So if you're Cancer, if you're Libra, if you're Capricorn, then this is going to be affecting you strongly. And then because we've got that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus, it's also hitting all the fixed signs as well. So if you're Taurus, if you're Leo, if you're Aquarius, if you're, where am I? If you're Scorpio, then that is also really affecting you. Like, and probably especially so if you're Scorpio, because you have got that that Mars driven energy as well going through there. And then because of the stuff in Pisces, it's also hitting all the mutables. So it's like, all the other signs, Gemini, Pisces, I said, Sagittarius and Virgo. So we've got that whole, it's basically all of us are involved. And I feel like that is why, it's because as a whole, like human race, we're being called forward now. We're being called forward, and we need to kind of like step up our game and stop kind of making excuses for ourselves as well. And not in a way that, like I said, like, it's never about being mean to ourselves. Like, if you've watched lots of my videos, then you know that I'm always saying, like, we need to be really kind to ourselves, and we do because we're not usually kind to ourselves, not in the way that we're kind to other people. And we need to kind of respect ourselves. We need to center ourselves this month. But we also mustn't let ourselves off the hook if we are, with kindness. Like, imagine you really love somebody and you can really see the potential in them, and they're just like, they're not doing anything with it. And it's probably because they don't believe in themselves. That's usually why we don't do what it is that we want to do, that we're here to do. And so what do you do in that instance? Like, if you love somebody and you can see that happening, then you really want to encourage them you want to give them that, you want to light that fire into them and give them that little push that they need. And that's kind of what we need to do ourselves now, to, for ourselves, because probably nobody else is going to do that for us. We tend to have to do these things for ourselves, and that's fine. That's fine. We can also do it for people we love as well. But it's kind of hard to do it. And especially like, when I'm saying about that communication stuff that is going on this month, we do need to be mindful of that we're not painful with our communication. But it's finding that balance. It's finding that balance between like not letting ourselves off the hook and then making ourselves accountable to actually moving towards what it is that we need to be doing, And because, like I said, it's so easy to stay in our comfort zone because it's comfortable. It's like, I know this, I want to stay here, but we can't now. We need to move forward. So I'm going to take a card from the Herbal Astrology Oracle. This is a really beautiful deck by Adriana Ayales, who is a herbalist and also obviously knows a lot about astrology, because the astrology of these cards is really beautiful. Just going to give these a little shuffle. So it's a deck that kind of layers astrology and herbal knowledge, which traditionally was like that, was how those things were understood to work. As we understand astrology now, that's how plants have their own astrological symbols and affinities. So a lot of our knowledge of plants now has become divorced from understanding them like that, but originally that is how people would have understood and worked with our plant teachers. So yeah, that's one of the things I love about this deck, is it brings that kind of indigenous knowledge back accessible for us again. So I'm just going to give them another. Okay. So the card that has come out for us for this moon cycle is tobacco, which the keyword on this card is offering. And interestingly, the planets that are on here is Mars, unsurprisingly, because we've got that kind of, we've got this Aries solar eclipse, we've got this really driving forward Mars energy, and it's also Pluto. And I didn't mention Pluto when I was talking about the astrology. I feel like because everybody's been mentioning Pluto for quite a while now, like earlier this year, Pluto moved into Aquarius, where it's going to dip slightly back into Capricorn very briefly at the end of this year, but then it's going to be in Aquarius for like a really long time, for like 20 years. So, because Pluto moves so slowly. So Pluto in Aquarius is a really big deal, and it is, again, another kind of like shaking things up. Aquarius is a sign that likes novelty, likes change, likes innovation, and Pluto is that kind of, is analogous with Hades, with like the underworld kind of stuff. So it's like dipping into the unconscious and bringing up new ideas, new ways of kind of seeing things. And this card, like, it's really, let me show you the picture of the card. It's really, really beautiful. And it is evoking that, like, the keyword on it, with it being offering. Tobacco is, like, for many people, a very, nowadays, tobacco has obviously become a problem. And that's interesting too, actually, because, because humans took it like a natural product that had been used for thousands of years by humans, probably without any like addiction problems. I don't know that, but I suspect that was the case. But then they combined tobacco with nicotine, with other things, with tar, and made it into cigarettes, and that then has become a problem. And like, that is so like, that kind of sums up the whole issue that we have as humans at the moment. Is like, this is a great thing, so let's like package it and sell it, and it'll be an even better thing. But what actually ends up happening is that it becomes a problem instead, and it takes us further away as well from like the original source. Like, tobacco originally is this, like, you can substitute tobacco in witchcraft for pretty much any other plant that you're using, plant offering for sure that you're using. Like, if you're doing spirit work, spirits nearly always love tobacco. It's like, it's for thousands of years it has been a spiritual offering, and nowadays we're a bit like about it because of how humans have interacted with it. And isn't that interesting? I think that's something that we can think about as we're going into this month, and we can look at ways perhaps in our own lives where we are misusing things perhaps, or losing that connection, because that's what's happening here. Is like, we're losing that connection from the kind of the core thing of what something is, and it's become something else. It's become a product, it's become something else. And so I feel like that disconnect, healing that disconnect between those things, and kind of getting back to the core of who we actually are, our indigenous self, our native self. Who is that? Our wild self as well, the self that does give offerings to spirits, the self that is in conversation with our ancestors. That is the energy we need to tap into now if we're going to move forward as humans here, and as individuals here as well. Let's have a look what Adriana writes in the guidebook for it, because she writes really beautiful explanations of these. So she's put it as a herb of Mars, like I said, so primarily Mars, and then also Pluto. So it's power, offering, divine gift, invocation, respect, deep alignment with will and purpose. Interesting. Okay, so yes, that's where we need to be now. We need to move into this deep alignment with will and purpose. And then if we, she also gives like the kind of shadow aspects of it as well, which can be illusion of power, power hungry, lack of respect, inner conflict, addiction, stuck in habits, fear of failure. Yeah, so it's all the things, you know, like as it always is when we pull cards around any of the things we're talking about astrologically, we see the energy astrologically, we pull cards and it's like confirms that we've seen. So, you know, this is why it's so beautiful when it all works together like that. Tobacco is used among Indigenous groups across the Americas as an offering to the gods for smoke cleansing, as an offering to the spirits, as a sacred smoke at council meetings, and as a ceremonial juice during vision quests. So, you know, that's a lot of Indigenous uses. It is not an Indigenous plant here in where I live in Wales, but, you know, we have other plants that are used for similar things, which would be mugwort, actually, would be one of the things that would be used like that in Britain, if you're in Britain. Widely used by shamans in the Amazon called tabaqueros, tobacco is considered a planta maestra, a teacher or master plant. These plants are key to protective spirits and important allies and guides in the healing of humanity. In pre-Columbian North America, different tribes used tobacco ceremonially. The main difference between them and the Central and South American tribes is that they smoke tobacco through a pipe. Various Indigenous peoples from the Americas use tobacco for healing a wide range of ailments, such as earaches, snake bites, cuts and burns, respiratory diseases, fever, convulsions, nervous issues, urinary complaints, skin diseases, and parasites. Really interesting. Lots of those are, from a medical astrology perspective, they are Mars, Mercury. You know, remember we've got Mercury retrograde in Aries and Mars is sign at the moment. A lot of those are Mars, Mercury issues. So perhaps offering will help us with that. I didn't talk about actually the Aries rules the head in medical astrology. So around the time of this eclipse, you might find that, like, if you do suffer with migraines or headaches, things like that, you might find that is triggered off more around this eclipse because it is such an intense Aries energy. So anything that we can do, also eyes as well, around the eyes, eclipses is always eye things coming up. So anything we can do to like rest the eyes, rest the head, we need to, you know, there is a like I say, kind of almost aggravating effect to this eclipse. So if you can find ways to offer ourselves soothing, then that will help us to be able to do this work. It's not about kind of like forcing ourselves. We are encouraging, we're not forcing. Many traditions hold that tobacco is a protective spirit given to humanity to enable communication with the spirit world. Interesting. So we're not doing this by ourselves. We are doing this through communication with other than humans. Tobacco is one of the ultimate ofrendas, or sacred offerings to the spirit world, placed on altars and traded among different societies for hundreds of years. It has been used by many Indigenous peoples as a symbolic token for sealing peace among tribes. Yeah, so like the whole like peace pipe thing, you know, that's come from that. Tobacco's most commonly used ritual since ancient times, smoke and strong purgative and anti-inflammatory effects mirror those of Mars's nature. Yeah, because it does have like a purging effect on us. It brings things out. And that is kind of what this eclipse is about. That it's like bringing things out so that we can make those unconscious things into conscious things, and we can start to see ourselves in a more holistic, conscious way. So the guidance she offers: the gods of power are here to serve, and they demand loving respect. Tobacco reminds us to utilize power compassionately. How we use and direct this power determines the quality of life. Offer your actions as a divine gift, selflessly and in service to the sacred. Grandfather Tobacco's protective and powerful energy lovingly opens the doorway to the spirit world, to those who ask with humility and respect. Don't allow the illusions of power to seduce you into destructive behaviour and addictive tendencies, which is something that I talked about last time with the Pisces moon as well, is that this energy is kind of, if we want to kind of like opt out, then sometimes people will be pulled more towards addictive tendencies at this time. Tobacco is here today to remind you of the importance of offering as a form of opening, invocation and respect. Offering is something that kind of fell out of favour a lot with like modern witchcraft, with paganism, but it's something that is so simple, you know. It's like offering something, and like it might be a song, it could be tobacco, like if you use tobacco, it could be some other herb, it could be a poem, it could be just spending some time at your altar if you have one, or like with a tree friend that you have. It is about grounding ourselves in our own power, not giving that power away to other humans who don't deserve it quite often, and not allowing other humans to have power over us, dictating our boundaries. We need to self-center and hold our own boundaries, but we can also make connections with other than humans, with spirits, with ancestors, and with Goddess, to hold us while we do this work of reaching our potential, of like catalyzing this big change that we can bring in now. And like, if you're in my membership, then we work with Goddess as well, and we're working with some interesting goddesses in this moon cycle. It'll be really interesting to see who comes out for us in the full moon as well, because that's in the center of this moon cycle when we're doing this big catalyzing work. I'll leave a link to the membership and everything down below if you're interested as well. So yes, that is our moon. Let me hold up the cards. So we're moving from Fox to Tobacco. Yeah. So let me know your thoughts on that. How are you feeling? How have you been working with Fox? How do you feel about Tobacco is coming out with us? Thank you so much for watching. Warmest blessings, and I will see you very soon.